Welcome to Muslim Apologetics Australia. We're going to be discussing 72 virgins. This is a hot topic that always is raised by the anti-Islamists. And, they think that they have this huge argument against Islam and Muslims. And, Islam is all about, this sexual heaven and this perversion and so forth. But, there's a huge irony in this. Most of these critics who accuse Islam of being about, a religion of sex and all this sort of stuff, they're the same individuals that criticize Muslims and Muslim nations for censoring sexual activity. Things aren't adding up here. Either it's a religion full of sex, either it's a religion full of, perversion, or it's not. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, Islam is a religion of, sexual, perversion, and then at the same time you make arguments against Muslim men saying that they censor women. For example, if Islam was all about, sexual perversion, then why do they make women wear burqas or niqabs or hijabs? If it was all about flirtation and a religion of sexualization, then why does the Islamic religion really focus on censoring the clothing of women? Doesn't make sense now, does it? It's the same bigots that say, look at Saudi Arabia. Look at Iran. You can't go into the street and wear a mini skirt. Look, this is intolerance. What kind of an intolerated religion is this? That it doesn't tolerate that women can wear what she wants. So it doesn't make sense. On one hand, they're accusing Islam for trying to close up the nakedness of a woman, but then at this other end, they say, Islam is a sexualized religion because you get 72 virgins and, ISIS teaches to rape slaves and it's all about raping women and sexual slavery. You see, it's not really adding up, is it? By the way, folks, ISIS is not Islam, and we have evidence below. You can visit the link below and you can see for yourself that raping slave captives is forbidden in Islam, and imposing that sort of sexual behavior on another woman is forbidden in Islam. So visit the link below. And here's another irony, folks. These same people say, look, Islam prescribes you to rape a woman. Islam prescribes you to, have your sexual fantasies and your perversion and force your sex upon another woman. But then the same Islamophobes criticize Islam for stoning people who commit adultery. And adultery is part of rape. Here we can see it is documented by The Independent, where a Yemeni man was publicly executed for raping and murdering a 4-year-old girl as crowd film on smartphone. So this man got the Shariah punishment in Yemen, and he basically got killed for raping a 4-year-old. So again, on one hand, you don't see, you'll have an Islamophobe saying, look, Islam is a barbaric religion for it executes rapists, but then at the same time, apparently Islam encourages you to rape people. Doesn't make sense, does it? So many fallacies. See, anyone who's studied Islamic theology and looked at the evidence of what paradise is like, because they say, look, 72 virgins, they have this corrupted scope that they just look through one lens and they don't look at the rest of the horizon and the rest of the theology of Islam, where it teaches so many things about what you get in paradise. But see, an Islamophobe doesn't like to talk about the good things that you get in paradise. They don't like to discuss things like how some people will actually get carried on birds and they'll fly around paradise. I mean, why don't Islamophobes like to talk about those things? Where on Friday we'd like to have thrones, there'll be many thrones, and we'll sit on it at a marketplace and be gathered around Allah. How you'll drink from the rivers of honey. How the heaven of Islam will not have the negative effects of the earthly beings, like bad smell, orgies that you hear, you see on TV, and all of these, corrupted things that, unfortunately show on very late night television, where people are having sex like animals, doing all sorts of evil things. The corrupted mind of the Islamophobe thinks, oh, you're going to have 72 virgins. It's going to be like a, Hugh Hefner, pornographic Playboy house, palace or something, where people are running around in their underwear and stuff like that. But of course, it's not like that. The Islamic tradition, when it teaches 72, this means that they're your wives. They are in different palaces. You visit them. And, what is wrong with that, really, over the course of infinity? See, the Islamophobe thinks, oh, look, you're all having these great big gangbangs and so forth, and all these sex orgies. They think through the mentality of the earthly being. That's not what Islamic sources teach. In fact, I'll even challenge any Islamophobe to show us a single narration where it says a man will be in the palace with 72 wives and they're all having sex with one another in front of one another. It's not there in the Islamic tradition. So why do they make their own fantasies up as they go? And they impinge it upon the Quran. So they look at what Western secularism teaches, the pornographic society and what they watch in movies and Hugh Hefner's Playboy Mansion, and then they try and impose that upon the Islamic standard. No, it's not how it actually works. That's a fallacy. And they like to butcher things outside context. They like to say things like, oh, how can there be 72 wives and so forth? But, when you really think about it, you might find this surprising and strange, but when you really think about it, it's not really. See, if you ask me, 72 is not that much, really. I'm being honest with you. 72 is really not that many wives, considering that you'll be living in paradise forever. Can you just sit back for a moment and think about it? Seriously, forever, eternity, you can't even put a digit to it. That's how long it is. You can't. It's impossible. You're going to live forever. So if you're going to live forever, is 72 really a lot? We live on this planet for a lifespan of, say, 65 years, if you're lucky, 78, the average age. And the average person probably, let's say, gets married, let's say twice. Let's be fair, let's say twice or three times. Because, the divorce rate is so high now, so I'm just being a bit fair. I could say 4 or 5 times. But anyway, let's say twice. That's 2 partners you've been with for the last 65 years. That's just 65 years. Now compare that to a heavenly abad that has no time limit. It goes forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. So is 72 really that great? I don't think so. In fact, it's quite minute. It's totally insignificant if you ask me. Now, you may say, as an Islamophobe critic, oh, well, yeah, fine, I understand it's stretched out, but come on, seriously, at the same time, 72 women? But then I kind of think to myself, none of these atheists or critics of Islam or agnostics We see some Christians complain, but, generally Islamic critics don't complain about, having multiple girlfriends. Apparently it's okay to have Jessica down the street, and across the road from that to have Michelle, and then, a few suburbs past that you might have Tanya and Elizabeth. Come on, you ask an average person how many girlfriends he's had throughout his years, and there's actually a study done on this, that a person has had sexual relationships with at least 6 or 7 different people until they actually choose the right one. So it's funny how it's just a different standard. Oh, I'm only going to marry one, but then at the same time, in my previous youth, I could just be married to so many different girls, but, I'm not going to call it marriage. I'm just going to call it a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. Wow, that's a big difference. The only difference is you're only tying the knot. Gosh, that's a huge difference. A piece of ring on the finger. Otherwise, you're having sexual relationships with multiple girls, and women may be having sexual relationships with multiple men. Now, secular atheists may say, oh, well, it's wrong because that's cheating. Well, what if it's consenting? Because at the end of the day, the atheist theology teaches, as long as it's consensual, it doesn't matter. I had an atheist come up to me and say, as long as, you could be in a sex orgy as long as all partners are consenting. So it's funny, folks, they, celebrate the consensual sex orgies of this earthly life, saying, as long as it's consensual, as long as it's not hurting anyone else, then this is totally acceptable. But, when it comes to the Islamic paradise, it's just a different standard now. I think Shabir Ali once said, may Allah reward him, he said, those who don't desire women in paradise over there, multiple women, they're usually desiring them over here. And those who don't desire it here will actually get it over there. So true. These anti-Islamists are obsessed with, how could Islam have 72 virgins? But, every other day on the news in the West, all I'm hearing is women, young women, selling their virginities. There's one here. $1.9 million, a controversial website, is selling a woman's virginity. She's actually auctioning her virginity to everyone. These people want to criticize the Islamic God and the Islamic religion, that, sex jihad, if you kill yourself, you're going to get virgins. But then, I'm sorry, this is going to make me chuckle, but at the same time, you're selling women's virginities online. Here's another one. 19-year-old auctions virginity for $3.9 million. Another one. So here's another one. Aussie student 20 sells her virginity on virgin auction website, Cinderella Escorts. Here you go. So they blame Allah and they blame Islam because Allah promotes these virgins of heaven. But then at the same time, you see the secularists and the Westerners are actually selling their own virginity and promoting it to the male population to say, look what we have to offer for you. And of course, the secular Westerners will say, well, she could do what she wants. She's got the freedom to do what she wants. If she wants to sell her virginity, that's her right. She's consenting to it, so there's nothing wrong, as long as she's not harming anyone. But hey, look, if Allah does it, if Allah actually promotes these virgins of paradise, it now becomes perversion. And we're not shying from it. We're not ashamed of it. Men like fast cars. They like women. They like money. I see that you may have a problem with it if you're gay, but then that's another story.
Heaven. You live for nothing. You are just there. You drink. You have sex orgies, and you worship Allah.
And see, he can't actually show a clear demonstration in the Quran or in the Hadith where Muslims are commanded to have sex orgies, group sex orgies. It's not there in the Hadith or in the Quran. So people like the apostate prophet, these liars, these online, warriors, they think that, they have something against Islam. But, you ask him for the evidence, prove to us in where, the Hadith or the Quran, and he doesn't even show a single source where you have these sex orgies, group sex and all these sort of disgusting things. And it's not there. See, they put their Hugh Hefner Playboy Mansion, concept into the Islamic heaven, but it's not there. So, when you hear 72 virgins, it could mean 72 women that have not been touched and by another man, they have been created only for you, and they are in different palaces, in different homes, in different locations, in the vast heaven of paradise, and of course that you can be with them on an eternal basis, which is actually, again, like I said, pretty limited. I mean, you're living forever and ever and ever and ever. Again, if you have that long eternity concept, then it's not very much, considering the fact that we only get 65 years of our lives, and we may only share two partners. In this video, I did attack a lot of the atheists and the sectors, but I can always show the Christians how they're wrong. In the Bible, it also teaches that King Solomon, for example, had 700 wives and 300 concubines. And of course, a Christian critic might say, oh, well, the same Bible in context also says, they corrupted him and so forth. But of course, women can corrupt you, but it doesn't mean that, that all of them are unrighteous. There will be, obviously, out of the totality of 700 women, I mean, that he's gone pretty far, actually, Solomon. And obviously, out of 700 women, you're going to get a lot that corrupt you, especially if they're non-religious. The point of the matter is, nowhere did Yahweh in the Bible ever condemn Solomon for taking 700 wives and 300 concubines. In fact, in the Old Testament, it says in Numbers 31 that Moses went to kill men, women, and children, and he actually kept 32 virgin girls, and he distributed them and so forth, and he gave some to the Lord, and he kept a lot of the sex slaves to himself and distributed it. Now, a Christian may say, whoa, that's the Old Testament. But hang on a minute. The Old Testament is the book of God as well. In fact, it is apparently Jesus who revealed the Old Testament to Moses, and that he was the God that inspired it. So if the Old Testament is an inspiration by God, who is apparently Jesus, it was Jesus who commanded Moses to take these virgins. But anyway, I'm going to show you something even more amazing. See, a Christian may say, oh, that's just the Old Testament. God changed his ways and he became, a better God in the New Testament and blah, blah, blah. Well, we could show them this. Here is a saying of Jesus in Matthew 19:29. It seems as though Jesus is actually teaching that there are more than 72 wives you'll get in an eternal life. Eternal life here is heaven. It says, let me read, and everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or fathers or mothers or wife or children or field for my sake will receive 100 times as much and will inherit eternal life. So here Jesus is teaching that whoever leaves, let's say, a disbelieving wife or a disbelieving father or a disbelieving sister, or whoever leaves them for the sake of Jesus and comes to Jesus, then Jesus will compensate them. He will reward them and give them 100 times as much in the eternal life. So, if you leave your wife because she's rebellious and she's a disbeliever for Jesus' sake, guess what, folks? Jesus is going to give you 100 of those wives in the heavenly abode of Christianity. And you want to make fun of Islam. Just like to touch on another point, just came to my head. It's interesting, they criticize the Islamic heaven. They say, it's all about sexual paradise and it's all about hurulahin and heaven. But, you look at the West and nearly their whole philosophy revolves around women and beauty. And, they have strip clubs, they have brothels, they have sex entertainment venues. They have things like beauty pageants, where all of these women are trying to, diet and kill themselves to look thin and beautiful and, and go on podiums and catwalk and parade and become the next Miss Universe. And you see them on the front page of every magazine, newspaper, TV. They beautify women. They look at women and they fantasize beauty and women so much. So it actually shows that it is something in interest of human desire. But then when Allah offers that in heaven, it becomes problematic. Amazing. You have Western men saying, oh man, I wish I could be with that beauty pageant. I wish I could be with her. She's just glamorous. But then when Allah offers the glamour and the most beautiful of beautiful women of paradise, it suddenly becomes a sexual perversion. Something that is distasteful, apparently. But then they'd wish it for themselves. Let me ask you for a moment, honestly, for all of the Western men out there, the Islamophobes, the critics, I'm not talking about the gay community out there. Okay, the straight folks, put your hand up. Tell me, if you were given 72 Miss Universes, beauty pageants, you're going to refuse, are you? By God, that movie Dumb and Dumber, I think there was a bus trip, right? And, there was a bus going past and this bus pulled over. It had all these beauty pageants in there. And basically everyone kept making fun of the movie and saying, oh, look how dumb they are. They refused that bus trip. Remember this scene? I don't even want to show you the images of the actual scene because it is obviously provocative and, shows sexual explicit, nakedness of women. And by the way, folks, this is coming from a Muslim man that is apparently sexually perverted, right? And obviously, in the days of Jahiliyyah, these are the movies that we unfortunately have seen in the West. And so this is basically the scene where these two guys, Dumb and Dumber, they basically reject a bus trip, not knowing, obviously, and they refused to go board the bus where it had just beauty pageants on there, and they were basically in their bikinis, and everyone called them Dumb and Dumber, and they were all made, obviously it's part of the comedy of the movie. Obviously it didn't happen in real life, but yeah, so everyone was, they were looked at as fools for not taking that bus trip because they were stranded in the desert somewhere and they didn't take that bus. And so this is the Western fantasy. They go onto the opportunity, they cringe to take the opportunity to be with, beautiful women. But then, when you get it in heavenly abode of Islam, it just becomes controversial, it becomes suddenly wrong, but then these guys fantasize it about in their movies. So I think it's just hypocritical when they use one standard upon their own theology, but then blame Islam and Allah for it.